7 o'clock, I call this meeting to order. Will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag. Okay, up next, we have roll call. You might be missing one. There we go. Okay, Ms. Martinez. Okay. Up next, we have the agenda approval. Counselor Yonville.
Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please start voting. Ms. Martinez?
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay. Up next on the agenda, we have our citizen comment segment. This is the portion of the agenda to where those who have filled out comment cards, I'll call your name, and if you could, come up to the podium, push the button where your mic is red so you could speak into the mic. We do ask that you keep your comments to within 3 minutes. If you're still talking at the 3-minute mark, I would politely ask you to end your comments at that time. I have 3 comment cards, Ms. Martinez. The first one I have is Helen Sigmund and Craig.
You just didn't say his last name.
Yeah. There you go.
It's hard.
Craig, I'll let you say it.
Wolf.
Yep. That's good.
Good evening. Thanks for having us and letting us speak. We're here with the Alamosa Memorial Park project that's being built over by the county buildings on 285. My time's up already.
There we go. All right.
So we just wanted to give an update. I know this project's been in motion since about 2016 when Frank Muniz started it. We have finally broken ground. Alcon is doing tremendous work. We have a few pictures of what it looks like. It's hard to tell, but it's meant to be a star. So the part that they've dug so far is going to be a star. And then the other picture is of some of the concrete work that they're doing. Alcon has actually graciously enough, they decided to improve and make some improvements to the concrete. They're going to put some of that stained glass in there, make it a little bit prettier, more presentable. And they're doing that all free of charge. That and the work required to do it, because they said it's a little bit more labor intensive. It has to be done at their facility. So we wanted to bring that up, and then we wanted to bring up that we also have our save the dates are officially out there for our annual 5K and 10K run that happens in November around Veterans Day, and our save the date is out there for our second annual car show that will be, July 13th.
And Jamie's helped us with that. Thank you.
And this time around, I believe that's at the rec center
Yeah.
instead of the county buildings. And hopefully wind will stay away this year. Other than that, I believe that was most of what we had to talk about.
Yeah, we want to give you an update. We
Yep.
want to thank you for your support. We want to ask people to donate. We are,
Continue to donate. We do have a
Continue to
Facebook page
yeah.
where it's easy to find that information for us. Just Facebook, Alamosa Memorial Park Project, would be hard to miss. These projects are a lot more expensive than goodness.
and then you
I can
know,
think of.
material costs are going up and up, and
Yeah.
it is a,
But we
it is a
appreciate,
challenge.
we appreciate all the help that we've gotten so far, and we're looking to continue to get this done, hopefully here in the near future.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. Okay, up next, I have Ruthie Brown.
Ruthie Brown. I live at 711 State Avenue, the green spot. Anyway, last fall, it was 5 extra seconds. Yay. It was discussed or in the budget that there was 850,000 to $1.3 million budgeted for across the board pay raises. And what I'm wondering is there a list someplace of what that amounted to and who got what? And so we know where our tax money is going to? That's one question. And the second question is, I think all over town, people are wondering, what are we going to do if busloads of undocumented workers come to Alamosa? There's rumors, there's this, there's that. I know Rio Grande County has already passed a resolution on what they will do, and it's quite strong. And I know that I think the Alamosa County Commissioners have not passed a resolution yet, but they have done a public declaration. And I would like to know what Alamosa is doing. And are we being proactive? And of course, if 2 busloads, 3 busloads, whatever, come to Alamosa, are they going to come right down by my store? And what are we going to do? Can we, are we working on it? Is there a plan? I don't see how we can afford anything, but that's just my opinion. And then about the homeless camp and the huts. What a sad experiment we've done in our town and to the people out there. And I've never been in favor of it. I understand the rules, or the reasoning behind it. But we never expected anything from many of those folks. And there are many folks who could not do anything. And here we are talking about taking them out. At what cost to taxpayers? Everyone thinks a grant is free. I think I've said it 100 times at city council meetings. Grants are not free. And so we put those huts in. Someone didn't take care of them. Someone didn't supervise them. Someone didn't something, because now are they going to be destroyed? There's got to be a better plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Donna McDonald.
Hi, I'm Donna McDonald, and I live in East Alamosa, but I've been here all my life, so I consider myself a native here. I'm going to follow up. Here we go. At least we get the beeps. I'm going to follow up a little bit kind of on some of what Ruthie said about the homeless. And I do know that we do have a problem, and the whole nation has a problem. I feel like they need our help, but we need to look at maybe doing some things differently. They should, and many are willing to try to make a difference in their lifestyles, and I think that we really need to look at that. I want to tell about, I did some research about a lawsuit called Martin v. Boise, and anyone can look this up. This is something that you can find on the internet. After getting some legal counsel, this is what I found. It says that you can't charge homeless for camping if there is nowhere for them to go. You can't ticket, fine, or jail them if they have nowhere to go. Well, this case came out of the federal Ninth Circuit Court. Colorado is in the 10th Circuit. So we're not the 9th. The 10th has not ruled on a case like this yet. So in essence, we're following the 9th. They may rule the same as the 9th if something was to happen, if we were to have a lawsuit go up against. So we don't really know. The only thing that we know is that we can't do those things. But what we can do is we can tell them, okay, I can't charge you, but you need to move on. So by creating what we have out there, it has created a problem that has allowed them to not be accountable. It's allowed them to be able to defy, to use the internet, to use the things that we have provided, that I have to pay for, that we all have to pay for, that they have handed to them. And so we need to look and say, okay, with all of this, have we been lied to? Have what's going on in our city? We need to look at the huts. Are we taking them down so that they can actually be accountable for something? Maybe what we need to do is, instead of with the Wi-Fi, just have it so that all they can see are job boards, or maybe look at mental health areas instead of being able to do anything and everything on the internet. Just some thoughts. Again, I know that we need to help, but we need to also have people be accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Martinez, can you give instructions to the Zoom participants?
Yes, sir, if you're on the Zoom app and you want to speak for public comment right now, you'll use the raise hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're on a telephone, you'll dial *9. I don't see anyone choosing to raise their hand, Mayor.
Okay, I don't see any hands raised either. So we'll go ahead to staff follow-up and comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Two of the speakers discussed opinions and thoughts as it relates to St. Benedict and the huts. And so I think that information is probably best reserved for when we get to that on the agenda. And we can go over some of the details that are occurring out at St. Benedict at that point in time. In regards to the pay increases, and if there's a list, I would need to check with finance and payroll just to find out what documents we have or don't have, or if it's something we'd have to create and compile type of situation. So we can follow up with Ms. Brown on that. In regards to the undocumented workers, I've made it clear that the city of Alamosa is not a sanctuary city. I don't know if council recalls having a work session, might have been a meeting many years ago when sanctuary city concepts first came up, and decided at that point in time not to be a sanctuary city. So since that time, the topic has not been brought back up. Unless council wants to direct me to place it on the agenda, I didn't know if there was a need. I think if we get individuals coming to our community that are unhoused, regardless of their immigration status or anything like that, we don't have resources for that type of situation, and we would be directing them towards St. Benedict, and there's not resources that the city has, which is one of the reasons we're probably not a sanctuary city. But I'm open to any discussion or direction, obviously, that council would want to give from a discussion perspective. And with that, I have no further updates.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, consent calendar A. Counselor Hensley?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, not, please start voting. I think we're missing one. There you go. Thank you. All right, Ms.
The-
Martinez.
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, presentations from outside agencies. The first presentation is Signs of Addiction by Dr. Eli Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. As Dr. Ely Walker makes his way up, and Holly brings up the presentation, I do want to give a little bit of a background in case individuals are not aware of Dr. Walker's background. He is double board certified in family medicine and addiction medicine. He works primarily at the Rio Grande Hospital, both in the emergency department and in the recovery clinic. But he also works throughout the valley and the state in addiction consulting and recovery efforts. And I was fortunate to attend a conference almost a year ago, maybe by this point in time, and was able to hear Dr. Walker's presentation and felt, for me as a layperson, it was extremely informative. And I thought it would be good for the public and city council to hear the same information. So with that, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you, Heather. It's very kind. Thank you all for letting me speak to you and just chat for a few minutes. How do I get through this? Is there a way I click or? Got it. Thank you, Holly. Okay. This is going to be a very high level overview of addiction. It's incredibly complex, but I think you can understand it. And so I'm going to attempt to impart some information and just kind of, explain a little bit about the science of what's happening in the neuroanatomy in the brain. And then also just very briefly talk about a few evidence-based treatments that are out there. So full disclosure, I am a paid consultant for CRP. So you should just be aware of that as we move through this. And again, hopefully what we're going to do is be able to, at the end of this, you should be able to have some sort of an idea of what is the definition of addiction, what is the basic neurobiology of addiction, understand how complex it really is, and then a few evidence-based modalities that we're going to talk about. What is addiction? There are some really smart people out there, much smarter than me, that have put big, high-level definitions out there. I'll just actually read these to you because they're informative, but they're a mouthful. So the American Society of Addiction Medicine says that addiction is a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experiences. People with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. The National Institute of Drug Abuse says addiction is defined as a chronic, notice that, chronic and relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking, continued use despite harmful consequences, another theme there, and long-lasting changes in the brain. It's considered both a complex brain disorder and a mental illness. Addiction is the most severe form of a full spectrum of substance use disorders and is a medical illness caused by repeated misuse of a substance use or substances. So again, very complex definitions. How I like to just boil it down is to say that addiction is continued behavior despite adverse consequences. Think about something in your own life, right? Something that you would maybe want to change that's causing a problem in a relationship, or maybe it's just like the Twinkies that you can't stop eating, right? And you know that your pants are getting a little bit tighter, but you keep eating them anyways, right? Like that's kind of getting into addiction a little bit there. So.
She's clicking.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
So there are a lot of models to try to explain health in general. This is one that I like, and I think, again, this is overall health. In this case, they're focusing on mental health with this particular model, but it's called the biopsychosocial model of health. And really what this is to say is that we are complex beings, complex organizations, and we have our biologic components. So that's composed of, the physical things that are, maybe we have some disabilities, maybe we have genetic vulnerabilities. We have the social environment that we find ourselves in, our peers, our workplace, our school, those types of things, our family of origin. And then there's our brains, our psychology, right? So there's trauma that happens there. There's your IQ, there's coping skills, those types of things. All these things come together to really help someone either predisposed to a disease, or also these things come together to help people recover from diseases. So Heather, Holly, next slide. When we apply this model to addiction, this is another way to think about it. Again, we've got the biological, psychological, and social components. And then we're going to add in use. We're going to add in some sort of substance in those settings, right? So it might be we're taking into the fact that somebody comes from a family where their genetics, where there's a lot of alcoholism maybe potentially in the family, right? So that's sort of a mark against them. If they were to start drinking, they are more predisposed to develop substance use disorder, okay? And again, substance use disorder, I should have started with that. That's just the really fancy medical term for addiction, right? That's what we use in the medical community. We call it an SUD, substance use disorder. So within this model, what happens is that over repeated time, these factors in the setting of substances, something just clicks in the brain at some point. And now, despite biological, psychological, and social determinants, we could fix all of those things, but something has clicked in that person's brain, and they now have an addiction to this substance despite these other things, okay? And so in and of itself, the addiction requires some sort of intervention or treatment, okay? So that's an important thing to remember. The other thing to say about this is that we actually proved that there's a problem with this model, and this is where medicine really screwed up, right? So the opioid epidemic, we took people that maybe did not have a lot of these biological, psychological, and social things, and we gave them so many opioids prescribed that we sort of forced them across this line and developed addictions. So again, this is a model. It doesn't explain every situation, but we find that there's a lot of truth in this for many people. Next slide, please. So what's actually happening in the brain? There's something called the reward reinforcement pathway, and this is deep in the lower parts of your brain, kind of like the midbrain or almost even the brain stem, the subconscious part of our brains, okay? And this is the dopaminergic pathway. You'll hear dopamine thrown around. People are like, oh, I got to get my hit of dopamine or whatever from extreme sports or, whatever it is. And what's happening in that circuit, this is a circuit that's designed to encourage us to do things that are good for us as a species. And so the things that naturally fire this system, some of the big ones is like drinking water, believe it or not, actually fires this system. Eating food, having sex. Those are like the big three that kind of like fire this system. And they are there to get you to repeat these behaviors because those are things that are good for us to reproduce and good for us to stay healthy as individuals, okay? We've obviously taken that too far in this high caloric society where you can go to the vending machine and get like way too many calories and just pack it all in, right? So that's where we've kind of, as a species, taken this one the wrong way. But that's why that's there. And again, that's the lower part of your brain. Again, the part that's not really conscious. If you look at me, I'm a perfect example, right? I'm this big bald guy. I have this huge head. What you see here is all prefrontal cortex. That's what gives humans such disproportionately large heads compared to our bodies. Like, right? Like not many other animals have heads this big compared to their body size. And that's because we have massive prefrontal cortex, right? Just all this stuff. That's the higher level thinking. That's the rational part of our brains. That's what's letting us sit here and have these conversations and talk and look at slides and analyze things. But what happens in this reward reinforcement pathway is that this lower part, this subconscious part, actually overrides the rational part, okay? So at some point in addiction, no matter how much you rationally know it's wrong, this lower part of your brain is just gonna push until it gets its way, okay? So that's kind of typically what's happening there. Next slide, please. So these dopamine spikes, if you look at these slides, so on the y-axis, we have the percent of the basal dopamine. So like 100% is kind of where things are starting. And then you can see like food has the ability, like if it's a really good thing, like this nice, like home style, greasy meal, something super salty that you really like, mom's, whatever it is, meatloaf or whatever you love, it can get you up to like 150%. That's kind of like above your baseline dopamine levels. Sex, as you can see there, has the ability to kind of like double your baseline dopamine levels, right? Like that's this really good hit and makes you kind of want to do that again. Next slide, please. Now here, are drugs of abuse, okay? And just kind of compare this to the slide that we just saw before. Look at morphine. Morphine similar to sex, and that's dose dependent. All those different curves are the dose that a person might get. They can pretty much get you at like twice your basal levels, okay? So that's an opioid there, morphine. Fentanyl, I'm sure, is even higher. These studies are very old, kind of prior to our fentanyl problem. Look at cocaine. That's a very interesting one. Above 300% of your basal dopamine level. Scary. Nicotine itself, above 200%. Alcohol, 175, 200%. Again, dose dependent on that one as well. So we are a very creative species, right? Like we've figured out how to kind of like hijack this system in our brains and get these hits that feel good in supraphysiologic ways that our brains were really just never intended to kind of experience. Next slide, please. So again, back to this one. The thing I want to point out on this slide is you see so I should have said before, but the reward reinforcement pathway is that green thing, the nucleus accumbens, and then that VTA, the ventral tegmental area. Those two things are kind of what make up that reward reinforcement pathway we were talking about. That's like the dopamine circuit. And then if you look up there, look at the two things that it's sandwiched between. It's sandwiched between your amygdala and your hippocampus. Does anybody remember what your hippocampus does? Memories. So it's like where your long-term memories come from, and amygdala is your emotions. So this pathway is sandwiched right between your memories and your emotions. And so that's one of the things that makes it so hard to overcome addictions, is because they are so deep ingrained in us. Those are the things that are just so core to who we are our memories and our emotions. And so this pathway is just like firing right in that whole mix there. That's not to say we can't overcome them, because we'll get into the part of the good news is that some of these things can be overcome, but that does kind of give you some insight into why this is so challenging. Thank you. So we're going to get into treatment and recovery. Go ahead and next slide. This is that same biological, psychological, social model again, with even now another layer around all of those things. And that's the spiritual component, right? So this is a very, this is a very important aspect for many people that are going through recovery, is finding identity, meaning, purpose, higher power, as you might have heard from like AA meetings or those types of things, something greater, right? And those things can be overarching for all of these great things. Before we looked at this model in the context of sort of like potentially the negative things. This one is awesome because it starts to put them in more of a positive spin, a positive light of like, actually, how would these things come together in recovery, right? So family, friends, peers, organizations, all that social support that many people need on their journey to recovery. Psychological, so learning self-regulation skills, social skills, all these types of things. Physical genetics, biological, so that's where I can come in medicine sometimes, is to kind of like add medications that might actually like change the neurochemistry a little bit in somebody's brain, okay? So next slide, please. So treatment, this is the exciting part. This is an all hands on deck approach when it comes to treatment of these folks, because this is a very complex disease. And I will be, even though this is my specialty, is the medications of addiction, I will be the first person to tell you that medications alone are not the answer to this, okay? They can help. We can help stabilize somebody. We can take the edge off, depending on, as you'll see, what they're particularly addicted to. Some medications are more helpful than others, depending on what's going on. But by all means, they are not the 100% answer. Okay, so just to make that clear. So mutual help, so that's like AA, NA, smart recovery, things like that. Psychotherapy, so counseling, CBT, motivational interviewing, all those kinds of things. There's a newer concept termed mindfulness. This is actually really cool. So this guy named Frankel kind of has a great quote, but essentially it's this concept that between a stimulus and a response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lay our growth and our freedom. So this is the concept, if you can go back to that picture before, of the big frontal lobe and then the nucleus accumbens in between. And there is like physical space between this lower part of your brain and then this frontal lobe that is the the true decision maker of all this. And so many times in this mindfulness, you're actually learning to kind of like create space between those so that when that craving happens, you actually have the opportunity to make an intentional choice to not act on the craving. So the other way to think about that is like, think about being at the airport and the luggage carrier is like the little conveyor belts bringing your bag around. Think of that. That's like your craving or your desire to eat that Twinkie. And you look at it and you go, I'm just going to let that thing keep on going. So it just keeps going on the escalator, right? It just kind of goes around for another turn. And so that's mindfulness. Contingency management. So this is a really cool one, particularly we'll talk about with stimulant use. So this is the concept of small, tangible rewards to reward desired behavior. And so this is like, think of your kids in like a sticker chart, right? So I have a 3-year-old, and so like for potty training, it was like every time she'd go to the potty and have dry undies, she'd get a sticker on the sticker chart. That's contingency management, right? And so that has been used in adults to reward desired behavior, whatever that might be in their recovery efforts, whether that's showing up to their doctor's visits, doing their counseling, taking their medications. They can actually get tangible rewards, whether that sometimes actually is cash, sometimes it's something physical like toothbrushes or different things like that. But this is actually one of the most evidence-based treatments for stimulant use disorder. So next slide, please. Specifically to break down topics, and we're almost done. Thank you for holding in there with me, but alcohol. So we're going to just hit like the top 3 here. So alcohol is a big one that we see in the San Luis Valley. There are actually great treatments for alcohol. Naltrexone is, or the other brand name is Vivitrol. These are actually opioid blockers, believe it or not. But what they do is they tap into that reward reinforcement pathway and they just kind of tamp it down. They sort of just like make it settle down a little bit so that when those cravings to use kind of come up, they're just not as loud. And so people really, this is actually one of the most effective treatments for alcohol use disorder, can be given as a once a month injection in offices. And that's really available all over the San Luis Valley. It's really great. Not a controlled substance or anything like that. Acamprosate is a little bit more niche. It's really only used when Vivitrol is contraindicated for some reason. And then gabapentin we can use as kind of an adjunct medication. Next slide. Opioids. So again, Vivitrol can be used. It's not great for opioids. It's again, an opioid blocker. But the problem is that people may get one shot, but they feel so crummy actually from that they often just don't go back for the next injection. So evidence is not great for long-term outcomes using Vivitrol in the setting of opioids. Some other things that are great, and actually these 3 are all, I think I should mention this, these are all FDA-approved treatments for opioid use disorder, okay? So buprenorphine, or the brand name is Suboxone. These are strips that can be given away, prescribed in any physician's office who has a DEA license. It used to be you had to have special licensure. They got rid of that last year. So now any physician can actually prescribe this. And it's something that they go to the pharmacy, they take in the setting of their own home, and takes away cravings, takes away withdrawal, really allows stability for folks that are addicted to opioids. That's a great one. And then methadone, really that's kind of the oldest kid on the block. It's been around a long time. We have the one methadone clinic here in the San Luis Valley, which is Crossroads Turning Point here in Alamosa. I used to be their medical director. I know them quite well. It's a great organization. They do fantastic work, and it's helping a lot of people. The nice thing about methadone is that it's a very powerful medication. The bad part is that technically it does have some diversion potential. And so that's why at this point, the United States has decided to only allow that within the confines of a methadone clinic, where you directly watch somebody take that medication every day until they sort of graduate and sort of prove that they're able to take it at their, at home. So next slide. Last one, stimulants. This is a tough one for me as a physician, okay? Because there are no FDA approved medications for this, okay? It's a rough one. When people walk into my office and stimulants are the primary substance of abuse, the primary kind of drug of choice, it's really hard to overcome that. That's when we really have to bring sort of other modalities, other treatments, treat the anxiety, treat the depression, treat all these other things, but directly for the stimulants, I don't have a lot to offer, unfortunately. Hopefully, there's some things in the pipeline. There's some data to say that Vivitrol plus the medication Wellbutrin actually can reduce people's stimulant use. I do use that combination on occasion and have had kind of mixed results with that one. Mirtazapine, a couple others, and then contingency management, as we discussed before. So those are super high level. I know this was just like a wild drinking from a fire hose, but wanted to give you guys just kind of an overall treatment approach. And then really the whole point of this is to say, how important it is with what we do with CRP. Okay, so.
Well,
the-
Dr. Walker,
Yes,
so if I could jump in before
Yes.
you transition to the CRP. So I hate to ask this because it was over a year ago and I hate to think I made this up in my brain. So Holly, if you go back to the brain, one of the pictures of the brain, I walked away from your presentation under the impression, because a lot of times I hear comments such as, they just need to stop. They just need
Yeah.
to stop using, as if it's a simple choice. And the two things that I kind of walked away from your presentation, and so I'm really hoping I didn't make this up, is one is after a certain amount of usage and affecting that reward cycle, that it starts to impact how much the frontal cortex is getting used. And so that ability to think critically and all of that is impacted. But then that there's just some rewiring is the second item. And so did I make that up
you
or?
sure didn't. You have a good memory. So I
Okay.
failed to mention that today, but it's a great point, Heather. So there's a term in medicine that the nerves that fire together wire together. Okay, and what that means is that over time, as this nucleus accumbens and ventral tegmental area, this reward reinforcement pathway, after it gets stimulated by a lot of these substances over time, it goes from like a backcountry dirt road to like an 8-lane interstate highway, right? And so what that means is essentially that it's just ready to fire, right? Like you give it a little bit of stimulus and boom, it is off to the races. And so over time, what we learn is that if we're able, let's say opioids are a good example, right? So if somebody is addicted to fentanyl, I'm able to stabilize them on buprenorphine and they stop using. We deal with their cravings. We take away any withdrawal. We get them into counseling, therapies, whatever else. We start to build all what we term recovery capital. So they're getting a job, they're getting housing, they're repairing relationships with their children and their spouse, those kinds of things, all these things that we would term recovery. Over time, that 8-lane interstate highway can be shrunk back down to more of a backcountry dirt road, okay? Where it's just not, you can only drive 45 instead of 85 or whatever, right? So, but as soon as they get exposed to that stimulus again, it really has that potential to quickly go back up to the 8-lane interstate.
And I feel like when you talked about, when we're interacting with someone who is in the middle of the substance use disorder, and you're like, why don't you just make better decisions? It's because they're not accessing as much can you talk a little bit about that? as well?
100%. So again, this PFC, prefrontal cortex, the big part of that makes us humans, this huge brain that we have, is pretty much all prefrontal cortex. And that's, again, this higher level conscious thinking, the rational thought process, okay? And so when this reward reinforcement pathway is firing hardcore when it's in the throes of addiction, it really is overriding this prefrontal cortex. So that rational thought is not truly an option, okay? So it's just not that somebody's making a bad choice. Once that switch has happened and somebody's in the throes of addiction, there are elements that are just not a choice at some point, okay? And so that's where things like detox is so helpful, right? So you can get somebody, just kind of capture them for the moment, get the stuff out of their system, get them in a slightly more rational place. They still have the 8-lane interstate highway, but at least nobody's driving down it right now, right? And you can start to just get some, make some rational decisions, get them into appropriate treatments, that kind of thing.
So sorry, now go ahead and head into whatever you wanted to from a CRP
so
perspective.
mostly just what I wanted to say is that, the partnership that we have, so again, I work at the recovery clinic at Rio Grande Hospital. And so that's a 100% addiction medicine clinic that we do on Tuesdays there at the hospital. We have an embedded case manager from Center for Restorative Programs. So we're able to do warm handoffs, meaning if somebody comes in and I identify a need, it's like, hey, I noticed you were 30 minutes late to your appointment. How'd you get here today? oh, Uncle Sammy drove me, but he was, an hour late, or we had to go run down and get a gallon of gas to even get here. Hey, can I, I've got some people that can help you get rides, like, that kind of thing. So if we identify a need, I can introduce and bring one of these lovely case managers into the room, and they're there every week. So it's a captive audience, right? And so this is a really nice way, this partnership. Honestly, I love what I do in medicine, but having these guys here and having this support, I'm bound by the walls of that clinic, okay? We talk in medicine about social determinants of health, all of those biological, psychological, social things. I don't leave that clinic, right? These guys do. They meet people at their homes. They meet them at their place of employment. They meet them wherever they are at their time of need, and really address those things that I'm not able as a physician to address. So that partnership has just been amazing for outcomes in our clinic.
Okay, Dr. Walker, I'm going to open up the mic to see if we have any comments from council members. Turn on your mic and I'll recognize you if you'd like to make a comment. Councilor Hensley?
So thank you for sharing that. I also want to thank you for all you do. I've known a couple people who have gone to see you. Actually, when you first started here in the Valley, things like that. And you made such a difference in their lives, because at that point especially, there really was nobody like you doing this. And it felt for those people that obviously in the city, they had more of that, but they were kind of here with not a whole lot of choice. And I think one of the things you did, I know talking to a couple people, is bringing up some of these creative ways that not everyone's made the same way. So not everyone can use one sort of way to solve that issue. And that idea of you bringing in those creative and different ideas. So I just wanted to thank you for the presentation, but also thank you for what you're doing for our community. You've touched a lot of lives.
Thank you. Thank you for that positive feedback. Yeah, awesome.
Thank you, Councilor Hensley. Councilor Dominguez?
I want to thank you for that presentation. I work with a lot of people in addiction, and I think the one thing community and people who are helping from a natural support scenario need to understand that it was complicated, but it was understandable. And I think we leave them pieces out when it's physician-based or clinical-based. And then when you have natural supports who are usually on the front lines with people, I think it's a normalizing tool. I think when people can understand how it works and you can associate it with heroin and a cheeseburger,
Yeah.
I think it opens a lot of doors to people who are dealing with addiction and what it looks like. So
Yeah.
I think if this could be explained to certain people who are natural supports in families, just an understanding, because I know that I've worked with families where the user and the parent didn't even understand what addiction was. So how can we fix anything if we don't understand how it works? So your presentation was, I think, presented in a way that anybody could understand, even though it was complex. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we all share that pathway to potentially become addicted. So
Okay.
I think it kind of brings that compassion.
Thank you, Councilor Dominguez. Do we have any other lights on? Okay, so I'll go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks again, Dr. Walker, for that presentation. As a council and as staff and city and community members, we genuinely care about the people in our communities. We're often trying to find ways to help people and meet them where they are. From your perspective, what are some things you feel that we can do that maybe we're not doing right now to make sure that services are available to the people who are in need?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That question. It's a good one. I think I have been honestly very impressed with the city and county of Alamosa and the efforts that have been happening. I'm working with the folks at Hope in the Valley to stand up their unit as well. And that's going to be slightly different than the detox at Crossroads. And the concept there is that it'll actually be, this is nuanced, but it's not truly a medical detox, but we will be providing medications to help folks detox. And the concept there is to try to offload the burden from the emergency departments. I'm an emergency physician, so we get to see people at their worst in those moments, whether it's alcohol or opioids. And oftentimes those patients stay with you for very long times. They take up a bed for 12 hours, right? Or whatever it might be. And so the concept there is to take somebody who might benefit from some medications, but can't quite go to, a non-medical detox like Crossroads, and then actually take them to this other facility and provide medications for them there. So hopefully that'll be open in the next maybe couple of months, hopefully, fingers crossed. We're waiting on state licensure. But honestly, the partnerships that have happened with that organization have been awesome. I've really appreciated that and kind of helping them acquire their building and doing the support there. You know, the opioid abatement council has been really awesome, great input from Lori Lasky and just, you know, Heather and so many different people. Yeah, I wish I could just put my finger on something, Mayor Coleman, but I think it takes so many different efforts and so many really grassroots kind of efforts, even, you know, Ruthie and kind of all these different people who have different perspectives and different ways that they can kind of address the problem. So things are happening. It's good. Yeah.
That's good. And just one other thing, if you don't mind, if you could just speak, and I'll recognize Councilor Carson here in a second. Oftentimes, we're approached by people in the community who may not be as sensitive to issues like this. It may say, why don't you just lock them up and put them in jail? Can you speak to the fact of why that's probably not the best way of handling situations like
Yeah,
that?
great question. So certainly there are folks that it's better for the safety of the community that they need to be sort of taken away and isolated, that there are people that would meet that criteria for sure. But we've learned over time that incarceration alone is not rehabilitative. Okay, so you know, potentially it's a bit of a detox, not a pleasant one often. And then if there's nothing that really happens within the walls to rehabilitate someone, to plug them into medical resources, psychological resources, jobs, those types of things, and we turn them back out into the same environment, that has just not proven to improve outcomes. There are a lot of efforts through the state now with jail-based behavioral health services, trying to get actual, you know, medical resources, psychological resources into the settings of our jails. And so those efforts are happening, and we've seen some successes from that. I can actually only speak to kind of Alamosa and Rio Grande. I don't quite know what's going on in Costilla, but yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And Councilor Carson has a question.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, because I don't know if there's something you want to answer or not, but is that facility also gonna be at all any sort of long-term care, like are you talking about the facility next to the hospital? Is this the facility
Are we
in
talking
Rio
about
Grande?
my recovery clinic or
Yeah.
the Hope in the Valley?
No, the recovery clinic. Is this like a long-term facility? or
No,
just-
yeah, thank you for the clarifying question. So what we have at the recovery clinic at Rio Grande Hospital, so it's in Del Norte, it's running the specialty clinic. It would be considered outpatient care. Yeah, so that, and at this point, there's no plan to expand that beyond that. Now, the folks at Hope in the Valley, I don't know their exact intentions at this point. What I know that they are moving forward with is what's termed a 3.2 withdrawal management unit, or a detox. And that's the part I'm involved with. And then they also are hoping to stand up an intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization. Both of those are technically outpatient services where someone goes to their own home at night and comes to the facility during the day for care. And there's certain requirements that, you know, hours of treatment and those types of thing that someone would meet. I hope there had been talks about inpatient care down the road. I'm not sure where that stands. I think that would be a fairly long-term goal at this point, but I think the IOP PHP portions are realistic goals at some point here soon.
And I think another resource not tied to those, but the opioid committee, one of the goals was recovery housing, because we
Yes.
had lost the recovery housing in the valley. And there is one that is getting ready to open back up because of support partially from the opioid committee as well. So
Right.
that is another resource that will be
Absolutely.
in the area.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, because, you know, speaking about the homeless folks, right? Well, if you don't have a home to go to at night, like, I mean, it's not going to quite work to just do like outpatient care if you have nowhere to go, right? So plugging into resources like the recovery housing, sober living, you know, those are going to be great, just kind of as everything sort of comes together. It's exciting.
Okay, Councilor Jackie Vigil, thank you.
So, is this Hope in the Valley gonna serve youth? Or is it adults only?
Great question. What I can say for the detox is that the detox will be 18 years and older. Because specifically for the detox, it requires special licensure. I don't know of any detox, well, I shouldn't speak, but it's only really like a very limited number of facilities that do adolescent detox. And that's the part I can speak to because that's my partnership with the Hope in the Valley folks. As far as the PHP IOP portions of what they're going to do, I actually don't know the details if that will be adult only or adolescents.
Thank you.
But thank you so very much, Dr. Walker, for sharing this presentation with us. It was very helpful.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, presentation from Intensive Case Management and Co-Responder Update.
Thank you, Mayor. Luke Yoder is making his way up. As he does make his way up to offer some updates, I also want to share, since we had the work session with council, Luke, Clarissa, and I have obviously had a lot of meetings. We've also had some meetings with the state, and, you know, the state's talked about maybe looking at this as an opportunity as well to see if we want to make any changes and to have those conversations. And so we are taking a look at, you know, like at least from a city side of, are we structured the way we need to be from a lead intensive case management? And is there some synergy from a structure with the co-responder program as well? And so, Joey Spangler, myself, the co-responders, we're having those conversations, and then Luke and Carissa are having some conversations as it relates to structure and stuff on CRP side as well. So just wanted to let you know, we're kind of thinking these high level, and once we land on something, obviously we'll report back. But then Luke, I didn't know if you had any other updates you wanted
Yeah,
to
I'll
cover
be very
too.
brief because we had an opportunity to really kind of dive into the addiction side of things. So I'll give kind of brief programmatic updates, but just to jump off what you were sharing, Heather, and thanks for the opportunity to be here, by the way, council. Just want to note too, that I think one of the things that came up in our work session was the opportunity to really make sure that this feels like a city-led initiative. And I think really that's part of the conversation around structure is how can the city make sure that it has, you know, knowledge of, awareness of, you know, and helpful kind of role in shaping where things are at and being that key point of contact that really can be eyes on the ground from a city perspective. So I think there's a real opportunity to make sure that that exists. And as far as the daily programmatic work of working with folks that are in the lead intensive case management program, making sure that they have the support that they need through the Center for Restorative Programs and the way that we're structuring our intensive case management team. And so there's some really exciting opportunities in kind of taking a fresh look at all of that. And just to again, take the next step in talking briefly about that, we have had transition within our staff, which has also given us an opportunity to look at how are we structuring roles, where will responsibilities lie, things of that nature. But I do want to highlight two, I think, celebrations that show, I think, some of the way that other people are viewing how effective we have been in this community at doing this work. And the two ways that I think that that's been recognized that I want to highlight are that Camille, one of our staff members, transitioned to the Behavioral Health Administration at the state to serve as their deflection and pre-arrest diversion program coordinator. So she's actually the person who will be overseeing under BHA the implementation of this work at the city. So she took the good work that she was doing here and used that as a way to kind of further what she's doing, and really excited on our end to be able to continue working with her. But she's taken that role at the state level. And then Carrie Deacon, who is serving as the project director for this work for the last 5 years since its inception, she transitioned to the National Technical Assistance Provider Task. And I couldn't tell you what that acronym stands for, and I apologize, but you can Google it. TASC as their senior director for deflection initiatives, because people, again, were recognizing the work that was happening here. So I don't know of a greater compliment than seeing that two of our team members have moved into these more kind of prestigious and responsibility-filled roles at the state and at the national level. In conjunction with that, we have been able to hire a new case manager that we're really excited to welcome, Jamie Martinez, who's sitting over here, and she's waving at you right now. We want to welcome Jamie, and she comes with a wealth of experience working in case management and working with the populations that we're serving, and really think she's jumped right in and been a tremendous asset already, and are very excited to have her be a continued part of the team. And do just want to recognize Trent and Gail and Timothy as well. for their work. And the last thing that I want to mention very briefly is that I think one of the core components of this work that has proven to be, in my opinion, a really key driver of our ability to kind of build some of these linkages that we've all been talking about with all the different service providers, the people that are doing work with people that are in need of real support and a real web of support, are our operational work group meetings. And at the work session, we invited council to attend those if you have any interest. And I want to appreciate that Dawn came today and was able to experience an operational work group meeting. And just to name that, that is a place where I am seeing a lot of opportunity for folks to make sure that everyone is aware of the myriad resources that are available in the community that not everybody knows about. There are so many new programs, so many new initiatives, so many new funding sources, so many new service provision opportunities. And one person can't know about all of them, but when we all come around a common table together, which is what we do in those operational work group meetings, we're able to make sure that everybody has their needs met as best as possible. And as we talked about with the biological, the psychological, the social, we need to bring all of those things to bear for folks who are struggling with that addiction issue. And so that's one of the really, I think, unique opportunities we have, is to all sit around a table, make sure that individuals' needs are being met as best they can be. And we do talk about biological factors at that table. We make sure people are connected to medical services. We make sure that people are connected to, they have the food that they need. They have what they need to be able to survive. We talk about some of the psychological factors that people are dealing with. We talk about social factors. So just a couple of really quick examples of kind of positive outcomes that happen in those meetings. We hear about people being connected to necessary medical services, being connected to housing, having their legal issues resolved effectively. We help provide transportation to important medical appointments, to methadone clinics, to job appointments, to medical appointments. We connect people to veteran supports. We connect people to employment opportunities. And just in the meeting today, all of those outcomes were named in the meeting. Is that a fair representation, Dawn? And so again, I just want to highlight that that group is really that collaborative effort that's doing the work of bringing that web together. And then our case managers are the ones who are on the ground, meeting with people, working very closely with the co-responders to make sure we know where people are. We have people getting connected to what they need to be connected to, and are helping people to achieve, the positive outcomes that they're really wanting to work towards and have a lot to overcome, as you just saw. So that's the last thing I'll say, unless there's questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Counselor Hensley.
So Luke, thank you for presenting, and I want to thank you because I know when the whole lead thing first came, and obviously we were kind of spearheading a bunch of stuff, and I just want to tell you how much I appreciate how receptive you and your team were when, obviously, like anything, when you do something new, sometimes it needs to be tweaked or adjusted. And so with that idea that obviously knowing that what was happening was really important and is still very important and really good, but that idea sometimes just needing to tweak things a little bit to make it better, especially as we're learning. So just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thanks for that feedback.
Thank you, Counselor Hensley. Counselor Krebs?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to take this moment to thank Luke and his team for allowing me to come out and be a fly on the wall today. Obviously I signed things, so I can't name names, but it was very educational for me to see the process of everyone coming to the table, and a brief overview of that, just as for my fellow counselors, is they do talk about people, but they talk about the organization that is helping them first. So if it's the Alamosa Police Department, or it's the co-responder program, or it's behavioral health, they'll say that, and they'll name the person, and they'll give it, and then the case management gives an update on that person, and then discussion happens from all the different groups about what else can be done, type thing. And so it was refreshing for me to see that the police department and the co-responders have seats at the table, but they're not the only ones sitting at the table. So that was very educational for me. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you, Counselor Krebs. Okay, I don't see any other mics, so I'll wrap things up. Luke, thank you and your team for all the work that you're doing. I appreciate everything that you mentioned, a lot of things that you're doing throughout the community. And I'm just curious if you can just do me a favor. Could you describe, paint a picture of what this community would be like without the services that you all provide, what would you think would be happening in our community?
Yeah, so I'll talk specifically about the intensive case management and lead work, because that really is why we're here. And I think without that work, one of the things I mentioned earlier is that we need that web. And Jamie, you mentioned, natural supports, family members, community members that can surround a person and help them overcome. Again, as we heard, there's these barriers that people have to being able to make the decisions that they know might be helpful for them. And so without, I think, the coordination that, again, I think the co-responders and the intensive case management together, hearing the work that they're doing to really be with people and help them overcome those obstacles and pull together that web. I think without that, then we do see people falling through the cracks a lot more. And even just in the meetings today, like the operational work group meeting that happened today, if we aren't having those conversations with people who are able to go and pull those resources together and make them happen, because we can talk all day about, oh, they could just connect to this, they could connect to that. But unless you've got somebody making that work happen, then it doesn't. And then we have people that continue to suffer and continue to live in situations that aren't healthy or feel good for themselves or for the community. So that's what I would say in response to that question, that we don't build that web in the same way unless we have people meeting with individuals who are struggling and helping them overcome those struggles on a minute-by-minute basis.
Well, and I think as you have the impact to the individual who's falling through the
Right.
cracks, which is very significant
Right.
and very real. But then you have the impacts to their family
Right.
members. You have the impacts to where if they need to start making decisions and stealing, creating victims,
Right.
those types of things, there's a ripple effect.
Right.
And so it is about the individual, but by helping the individual, you start repairing fabrics within the community as well. And I think that's important.
100%.
Thank you so very much. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a comment.
Oh, Counselor.
I just
Dominguez,
want to
sorry.
comment about the natural support scenario you guys offer. Me and my wife came in CRP about 4 years ago as a natural support with the group. And what Heather was just speaking of, we came in for one individual, a youth, but we've helped the whole family in the last 5 years to the kids that were barely talking and walking. Now we have them in our community center and we do work with them, but we're just community members. Like, that's how it started. And I can't express how important that is when you talk about that fabric and just talking to different resources and explaining what kind of programs are out there. Because if we wouldn't have been so aggressive in wanting to help youth, I don't know if they would have known that this resource was available, that it still exists.
Yeah.
The person's not involved with CRP no more, but they're highly involved in our work in community and what we do. And the whole family's ended up needing our help through the last 5 years. So
Yeah.
thank you for letting us team up with you and do that from a different perspective, a grassroots or community perspective.
Yeah, thank you for that, Counselor. And I think just to jump off that, and then I promise I'll be done. I think that connection, we have to be connected to people in our community, whether that's connection to a faith group, whether that's connection to a family member, whether that's connection to a group like yours. If we're not connected, that's when we struggle and that's when we fail. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up, that when we build that one connection, how many more connections can happen because of that. So thanks for being a part of that too.
And the connection came from my daughter from school. She went
Yeah.
to school with this kid.
Yeah.
And then after that, we got to know the family. So
Yeah.
it was actually something that helped spare the family from a lot of other things that they were going through.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, so I believe up next, we have our co-responder update.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
Go for it.
Connie's gonna share some of the data, just to kind of give you a bit of an overview. You know, the data points don't encompass what we do day to day, but we can share some stories on top, in addition to that as well.
Yeah, and I think I know most everybody. I think not everybody has met me, but we are fully staffed. Tim and myself are the co-responders. And then we have April who is our case manager and helps a lot on the back end. So we pulled some numbers and just went over the last 6 months, just to give you an idea of what we're doing and how it's working. The individuals that we have served in the last 6 months is about 116. That's not individual contacts. We might see people multiple times a day. But that's the total number of people. As of right now, we've got 73 that are active that we're still working with in some capacity, and 43 that are inactive. And that could be, they might have moved, they might have gone to a support system, they might have gone into treatment, they might not want services. So we've inactivated them. I took a look to see what we were doing and where we were connecting people and just pulling some numbers over the last few months. We connected 18 people to case management, and that's kind of a broad term. A lot of times we'll use lead and make referrals for that. We also use Valleywide. Their peer supports. We use SLV Health, SLV Behavioral Health, just kind of depends on what the needs are and where that person fits best. We connected people directly into behavioral health, about 22 of them. And that's kind of at least pointing them in the right direction to get hooked up in regular services for mental health needs. Housing resources, that's a big one. We've connected about 27 people, plugged them into different resources for housing, either vouchers, going through case managers to get on lists or the housing authority. Substance use disorders, kind of piggybacking off Dr. Walker. That's probably one of our biggest utilizations is we have directed 36 people into some type of substance use help, and that can vary. That might just be local. There are some people that we have gotten into treatment. You know, whether it's here, whether it's detox here, or whether it is out of the valley into something more longer term. We've had about 13 people total that we've gotten into a higher level of care. And that could be the substance use treatment, and that also could be a higher level of mental health care as far as hospitalizations go for folks. Victim services is another thing that we work with. You know, whether it is we're working with a victim, getting them with TUCASA, getting them the help they need with that, or the victims advocates through the sheriff's department. And we've had 11 of those recently. Now, as far as like working with other agencies in the community, I think we've done really good as far as like just making partnerships. Like we work with LEAD quite a bit. We also work with Crossroads. We work with AHEC, which is the area, what is it? Area?
Health education.
Health education. They've got some peer supports and Crossroads, and then Valleywide and SLV Health as well. We work quite a bit directly with the hospital. A lot of people show up in the ER, so we get a lot of referrals from the hospital, and then behavioral health as well. And I don't know, I jotted down some other things. I don't know, as far as like, we try to help with a lot of the community events. We kind of helped out with the farm park. They did a mural event in Cole Park, and we helped them kind of relocate some folks that needed relocation. So we kind of helped make that smooth. Pride, I think we were both involved in kind of helping out at Pride. La Puente, we spend a lot of time at La Puente, and that's one of our direct partners. That we spend a lot of time there with the events, and we work with the same people as La Puente, and LEAD as well. So, and then, I know there's others, Tim. I can't think of any.
Yeah, we're like Connie said, we're we're always developing new partnerships in the community and out of the valley as well. You know, Valleywide is now Valleywide has encompassed the Southeast Health Group. That's all Valleywide now. So we've been over to La Junta a couple times to take folks over that way. Up to Salida, taking a couple folks up to Salida to the Sol Vista treatment there, right by the hospital. I get to share, this afternoon, I talked with a mom, and we had been working with her son, who's in his mid-20s, for a number of months, reaching out to him and checking in with him and encouraging him to take another step into treatment. And we finally did help with that transition into treatment. And she wanted to let me know that he has completed longer-term treatment and is currently in a sober living house on the Front Range. So that's good to hear that kind of update. And you know, that's a success. We're claiming that as a success right now. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we'll take that as a success. You know, a lot of the situations we work with, whether it's folks that are coming into contact through law enforcement or street outreach or any of our partners, these are complex situations. These are tough situations. And oftentimes it's just, it's working with them day after day after day and working those connections that we have. You know, sometimes I have the image of someone in the middle of a raging river, and they're kind of stuck. They don't know which way to go. And we reach out to them, and hopefully they'll reach out to us, and then we can reach out to a partner, whether it's a lead case manager or, you know, someone at the hospital or any of our other community partners, and help them cross over to safety. And I know that Connie also has a story that she wanted to share as well.
Well, and I think, yeah, and one thing that it's been very interesting that we've had to kind of roll with some strange situations. And the goal of it is to, you know, get people to the best place that they can be. We had an individual that we actually came in contact with through a city employee referral. And this individual was homeless with a very young child and was not in a very good situation. And there was a lot of substance use issues going on there. You know, and I think the whole community kind of came together. We looked at different options because the normal way of going about things is it would be somebody, you know, CPS coming in, taking the child, foster placement. We were able to locate other siblings that had already been adopted out to a family and talk with that family, and they were willing to take the child to be with the siblings. And so to facilitate that, it helped the child immensely. I mean, just basic safety. But then also the mom, it gave her an opportunity to get the treatment that she needed and probably would not have gotten going through the law. So I think some of these things, they're little and we're always kind of scrambling on our feet because the needs are so different. But I think that we've been able to kind of fill that so far. So a lot of stories like that, and I don't know if Joey has anything.
So, I just came up, obviously I'm not the co-responder, but these two are pretty humble individuals and they just don't pat themselves on the back enough. Like, really, this program has been a tremendous asset to the department and the community. One thing I do want to highlight is Connie and Tim said 116 individuals serviced in the last 6 months. What we don't take into account, and what I'm asking you guys to keep in mind, is these are 116 high risk for repeated contacts with law enforcement individuals. So yes, the number 116 is high, but the amount that it is decreased on our contact is easily 2-3 times that number. The other thing they kind of skimmed over is, I mean, I don't even think they mentioned it, is the education and training they provide our department, which helped us out on how to deal with mental health and substance use and certain kind of legal and medical holds that we're allowed to do. And I can tell you, just in the month of February, we utilized it probably 15 times, where in the last 15 years, I can't tell you one time our department has utilized it. And it's just for the lack of knowledge on our behalf. So, yes, they talk like it's just another day on the job, but I'm telling you, they've been a blessing to our department, so.
Thank you, thank you. And before you leave, I want to make sure, council members get a chance to make comments or ask questions, okay? Counselor Hensley?
So I think this is phenomenal. At some point off here, because I actually have some questions. I'm more just like how a day in the life is and things like that, but we won't do that here. But what I will say is that I am super proud of our city. I'm proud of our police. Obviously us having the two of you, the three of you with, is it April? Okay, so having the three of you, but that we are being, progressive thinkers, that obviously, policing is not the same as it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. We have different things that are going on, and that we are adjusting and adapting to what's also best all the way around, the full circle. Obviously protecting our citizens, but at the same time, finding the best resources, the best way to help when it's not necessarily somebody, when it's not necessarily truly a crime in a sense, there's other things that are affecting that. So anyway, I feel proud and I'm glad and thankful to everybody being so accepting of this on the police force, as well as both of you really assisting in that.
Yeah, Liz, I'd be happy to have you come along with us any day. 719-580-5411. You know, I know I've given out my number here before. I'm serious. Call me anytime and you can ride along with us. We'll take you around. I'd even invite you to take me out for lunch.
I was wondering if food was gonna come up. I was wondering, I was gonna mention bring snacks or something, so.
Snacks for sure.
Counselor Krebs?
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
And just to, Counselor Hensley mentioned it, but I just want to emphasize just the gratitude of the police force being able to embrace this new, I can't even call it technology, but this new way of looking at people and individuals in the city. And I know, as she said, policing has changed drastically in the last 5-10 years. And the fact that the police force is learning from this, and together you guys are just becoming stronger as a unit. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you, Counselor Krebs and Counselor Dominguez.
I just want to thank you guys for being on the front lines like that. I know some of the individuals are harder to work with, and I work with a few who speak very highly of you folks, so thank you guys.
And thank you for the work that you've done and what you've extended to these folks we work with.
Okay, and I'll wrap things up. I don't see any other lights on. Just curious, as far as calls that you receive, do you find that the people who are calling you, are you getting calls from the family members or the people who are experiencing some of the behavioral health and mental health issues?
I would say, we get I would say our calls come from a very diverse source. Sometimes they'll go through dispatch if family calls, sometimes they'll call us directly. A lot of people have our numbers and they'll give it out. But yeah, family members call us quite a bit I just don't know what to do about my child, my spouse, whoever it is. How do I manage this, or how do I get some help? So yes.
Your neighbor?
Neighbors, okay. Is there anything you feel that we can do more of to get the word out about the co-responder program? Or do you feel that it's getting out in the community the way it should be at this time?
Again, feel free to give our numbers out. Connie's number is
298-6800. I forgot the 719 in front of it.
Okay. Thank you. And then I just have one final question for you all. You deal with people at, difficult crisis in their life. And then it's like, probably like you're on a roller coaster as well, emotionally dealing with them. How do you deal with that on a daily basis? How are you feeling? How are things going in your life?
It's kind of a personal question, Ty. Um, what- um, really yeah, the folks are generally, there's some very difficult, unpleasant folks that are not fun to be around sometimes. And that can be hard. But the enjoyment, can be in helping someone out for sure, but also the camaraderie that you develop in working with community partners, working alongside the folks in the police department, in the city, going over to Eric's office and asking about his next bike ride, stealing candy from Kathy Woods. I guess it's not stealing. She has a dish there. Operational work group meetings. I try to leave there had some laughs, because often, when you're with folks that are struggling, it's not funny. It's hard.
Right.
So when we can have some laughs as a group, these guys are taking me out to lunch tomorrow at Thai House. I mean, that is fantastic. So that's part of the fun. But Ty, when we can work together on things, when we can have some hope for things that are coming in the future, like the Hope in the Valley, that when I can be plugged into growth and new opportunities in different organizations, that's great. I know Valleywide is undergoing a lot of different growth. And to be a part of that, I'm curious what's going to be happening with the old courthouse. To feel like I'm a part of the positive change in the community is something that keeps me going. But yeah, we do have challenges with, boy, how can we make our systems work better? And that's tough. How do we get an organization that we don't feel like is doing all that they can? How can we get them to the table? That can be a challenge. I know that later tonight on the agenda is one of those difficult issues, and we've certainly been a part of that conversation. And that going to St. Benedict's is a regular part of our week, and working with the folks that are there. That's a tough population that lives there. It's really difficult. So yeah, being a part of that conversation is important. That might not be fun, but I mean, the conversation might be challenging, but being a part of it is important.
Okay.
And Tim, I think
yeah.
you guys have made some connections at the state level to where you can be part of the discussions and network of co-responders in other communities, which I think can start having some benefits as
Yeah.
well, type of thing. too.
Absolutely. I did critical incident training with the recruits with Albuquerque Police Department. And I continue to participate they do weekly CIT Zoom, and it's training. Someone will present a case, a difficult situation in their community, and they can get feedback from everyone that's on the call. And these can be folks from all over the country. And then there'll be a didactic, a little learning piece too. So that's an important way to stay connected to.
Okay, Jim, and I think Connie was gonna say something if she wanted to.
Well, and just to kind of piggyback on that, I think we're dealing with a stressful population, and when you're dealing with crisis and trauma and a lot of stuff, in anybody, especially the first responders, I mean, it's easy to take that home and take it on yourself. And I think self-care. And then one of the biggest things is having a supportive team behind us, that we're not taking that burden home to our families every night. And that's been big, because I don't think that there's anybody that I work with, like Tim said, whether it's here, whether it's at PD, whether it's with community members, that I can't count on. So for me, that's huge. I can go home and sleep easy at night.
Okay,
Yeah.
but
I just thought of one more thing, Ty.
Sure.
Yeah, I got to take part in the Shield 616 bike ride this past fall. The border to border bike ride for the Angel Armor for the police department. And that was a very positive event for me. Felt like I was giving to the community and then going on an adventure with like-minded people from all over the state. And I'm planning on doing that again, different route, but in May. And I know that the Alamosa County is slated, they're on the schedule to get Angel Armor upcoming. So that's another positive way to keep me going.
well, thank you all so very much for sharing that, and keep going and keep doing the great things you're doing throughout our community. We really appreciate you all. Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Okay, all right, that brings us to the next item on the agenda. The Women's Citizenship Club update on Crane Committee.
And Mr. Mayor, can they bring their sign up?
Yes, yes, please bring your sign up. Thank you, Councilor Krebs.
See that?
Coming soon. Go.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much for having us tonight. We're so happy to be here to give you an update on the
Thank you.
Jocelyn Russell Into Thin Air Cranes and Flight Project. I'm Mary Russell, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm the Crane Project Chairman and a member of the Women's Citizenship Club. And I'd like to introduce other members of our committee, Teresa Rutter, Sharon Adcock, and Helen Taylor. So Teresa's going to start and talk a little bit about our organization.
Good evening. Mayor Coleman, council members, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. As Mary said, we are the members of the Women's Citizenship Club here in Alamosa. We also are members of the General Federation of Women's Club. The General Federation of Women's Club is one of the largest and oldest organization of women in the world, dedicated to enhancing our communities through volunteer service. Since 1890, the General Federation of Women's Club has distinguished from other service organizations by the breadth of our outreach. Our community service programs span all areas of the lives of our community members and our families. And we do this through arts and culture, civic engagement and outreach, education and libraries, environment, and health and wellness. In fact, you probably didn't know this, but the National Library Association has indicated that it was the General Federation of Women's Club that has helped to build 75% of the libraries in the United States. Through our GFWC, that's our General Federation of Women's Club, that's what we call ourselves, GFWC, Arts and Culture Community Service Program, members promote and support arts and culture programs in their communities and in their clubs. Our goal is to create projects that include crafts, dance, drama, food, music, and other manifestations of arts and culture that develop skills, awareness, and appreciation. It is designed to inspire club women and ignite within them a desire to make the world a more beautiful, thoughtful, and caring place. This is why we're here tonight. As part of our Arts and Culture and Community Service Program, the Women's Citizenship Club members were inspired to enhance our community by bringing a fantastic and beautiful bronze monument to the community of Alamosa and the San Luis Valley. Into Thin Air, it is called Cranes in Flight, is a monument which is created by Jocelyn Russell, the renowned sculptor and hometown girl of Alamosa. She was raised here and has lived in the valley most of her life. So as you know, or even if you don't, our 26 club members have been working and fundraising for the past 3 years to bring this monument to reality. It is our gift to the city. We believe that this beautiful piece of art will increase tourism, will help generate funds for our local community government, increase job opportunities, and most of all, celebrate the arts. And now Mary will tell you the rest of the story.
Thank you, Teresa. So I'd like to ask the audience and the council members if they have heard about the monument and know more about the size and location, or if you'd like me to update you on, for those of you who don't know, the crane monument will be placed at the Colorado Welcome Center on 6th Street. It will be two life and a half size sandhill cranes in flight with an 8 to 9 foot wingspan. And it will be on a concrete pedestal. And Visit Alamosa, okay, sorry. Visit Alamosa is providing location, landscaping, and the pedestal part as part of the construction. And that will take place. And our installation target is fall of 2024, so this year. Stay tuned. We have met our initial goal of fundraising. Prices have risen, so we're continuing to fundraise and accept donations. The maquettes are available for sale as part of our fundraising project. And part of the proceeds of the sale will go back to our project. Part goes to the foundry costs and part goes to Jocelyn. We envision plaques on all sides at the base and will list donors who could have contributed $1,000 or more. We will include information about the sandhill cranes and the migration that they do throughout the valley, and also about the Crane Festival, which is the oldest birding festival in Colorado. So it's really important to include them and their support. We plan to use Rocky Mountain Memorabilia, a local organization, for plaques. We developed an MOU with the city, met with Heather and the art committee, and we have outlined the agreement between the city and the Women's Citizenship Club about who will do what. This includes at least yearly maintenance. I shared with Heather an email with pictures of a couple of monuments of Jocelyn's. And unfortunately, depending upon the placement of her bronze sculptures, they can really they can turn a color that's not as beautiful, as detailed, just because of weather. Like there's a Reckless monument in Camp Pendleton, and because of the ocean and the humidity, it really has affected the monument. So it really is important to have yearly maintenance. And as Jocelyn described to me, it's like a car. So you wash your car with soapy water, and then you dry it, and then you add a layer of wax, just like you put on a car, any kind of car wax, and then you buff it. And it really makes a difference in the detail, the color of the monument. So it will need to be cleaned at least on a yearly basis and maybe twice a year to preserve its beauty. So this is the maquette, which you can see, that is depicting what the life and a half-size crane monument will look like. Does anyone have any questions?
All right, let's see.
Now, is this the first public announcement of potentially making your goal?
I think so.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
want to I'm not sure there was enough drum roll for that,
Yeah.
so I just wanted to make
We
sure.
were very excited to reach the goal. And
Yes.
And what's really wonderful about it is everyone has contributed $20, $30. We've gone to First Fridays, we've gone to the Crane Festival. People put dollars in the jar. Everything makes a difference. And one of the important things we plan to put on the plaque is a thank you to the citizens of Alamosa and the San Luis Valley, because it really couldn't have happened without all of you. So we really, really value every contribution, big and small. So, yeah.
Okay, we have a few mics on. I'll go with Counselor Jackie Vijo.
Hi, I'm really excited about this because Jocelyn was a classmate of mine.
Oh,
We
great.
graduated together, so this is really exciting because I've followed her work. And so this is just so exciting for me to hear this, and that this is the first time I've heard it, so
Great.
I'm just
Yeah.
very excited and thank you for your work.
Well, we really realized that we should have a monument of Jocelyn's in our town. She's from here. She went to school here. She worked for 12 years with Ben and Bessie Kanishi as a vet tech and has a love of the valley and the people in it and has always loved cranes. And that was her. We talked a lot about different monument options. Cranes were really what she wanted to do. And so, yeah.
And also Jocelyn is donating every bit of her time and talent to the tune of $70,000. So we didn't have to raise that extra $70,000 to get that monument. So that is really an amazing thing that she is gifting to the city as well.
That is amazing. Okay, Counselor Dominguez and then Counselor Hensley.
You saying that the wingspan is 9 feet?
8 to 9 feet.
On both cranes? That's impressive. I just wanted to point out that in here it shows where you can donate.
Mhm.
And can you get this like off your website if you wanted to print it, or how could we get some more of these if we wanted to?
We have more
We have-
copies.
Okay.
Yeah,
We have-
we have
we
plenty,
have
lots of
lots.
copies. And all you have to do is ask and we will bring some to you.
Thank you, ladies.
Also, if you can drive by the Welcome Center and there's a big banner there that says coming soon. And there's a QR code that you can use to donate as well.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Hensley.
I was just gonna say, remember when this first came to light, I'm on the marketing board as well. And so I honestly, when it was spoken like, oh, this will come in fall 24, I kept thinking, oh, that's so far away. But here we are.
I know.
And so it's pretty exciting.
Well, we started before the pandemic and we came to council and talked to you about it and got a lot of support. And then the pandemic happened and it's like the world stopped. And so we stopped and, it took us a while to get back on board, but we did it and we're very, very excited. It's been a learning process for sure.
Okay, I don't see any other lights on, so good. I'll wrap things up. Thank you all so much for your energetic presentation. We needed it right about now. So thank you all so very much. And you ladies are movers and shakers in our community.
We
and it's
are.
Always.
We really are.
I-
We feel very, very happy and thankful that we have been a part of an organization. In fact, our Women's Citizenship Club, last year, we celebrated 100 years. And you saw us marching in the 4th of July parade with our wings, just to show you that we were ready to fly away with our cranes.
And, I have to comment on what Tim said. I really think having a sense of purpose makes such a huge difference in your life. And so I'm really grateful to have the organization and be involved because we can do a lot of different activities. We have a lot of opportunities to help the community and help others. And it just really gives me a great sense of purpose.
Well, thank you all so much.
Thanks so much.
They say attitudes are contagious. Your attitudes is worth catching, so keep it up.
Anybody want to lock it? Only $3,000.
Thank you so very much. All righty. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, Development Services, Public Hearing, and motion authorizing staff to submit a community development block grant in the amount of $600,000 for construction of the Boys and Girls Club of the San Luis Valley's new Early Childhood Learning Center.
And Mayor, Rachel's going to be handling this through Zoom, so she's up on the screen.
Okay. All righty, Ms. James.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council.
evening.
I am here to present a public hearing for a community development block grant. The city will serve as a pass-through for the Boys and Girls Clubs of the San Luis Valley. It's the second time that we have served as a pass-through for them for CDBG funds. The first was a $450,000 grant so that they could do the design and engineering of their early childhood center. And this is a $600,000 application, so marginally more, so that they can do the actual construction of the childhood center. So far they've secured over 3 million of the 7.5 million that they need in order to build. They have a commitment for another 700,000 in mostly donations so far. And then the rest of the funds will be through a construction loan. But this center is 15,000 square feet. It should be able to serve about 140 children and should be able to employ about 40 new employees. It's a process they've been working on for a long time. Kathy Woods, our economic development director, actually serves on the capital fundraising committee and has helped them secure these construction funds. And my department has been serving as a liaison during the construction process, helping them navigate sort of architecture and the building code and making sure that all of their grant reporting requirements are met for their first CDBG grant. So this is a public hearing. The community is allowed to weigh in on what we're requesting, but this is an incredibly valuable new development for our community. There's been a lot of stakeholders for many years invested in building this childhood center, and it has huge implications for economic development and the well-being of our community. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. James. Okay, at this time, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing, authorizing staff to submit a community development block grant in the amount of $600,000 for construction of the Boys and Girls Club of the San Luis Valley's new early childhood learning center. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to make comments pertaining to this, feel free to come up to the podium. Okay, I don't. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I just want to say thank you so much for the everlasting support from the city for many of the programs of the Boys and Girls Club. This is not something that we anticipated doing, but we've walked into it because with a coalition of partners that represented both county and city government, individual businesses, grandparents, and care providers, we knew that it was necessary. I got some data very recently from Sherry Valdez and the Early Childhood Council. There are 5,000 children between 0 and 6 in the San Luis Valley. 5,000. Of those children, right now there is only licensed care for 11% of children between 0 and 3. So that means 1 out of every 10 0 to 3-year-olds in our valley has access to licensed care. Right now, 31% of children between 0 and 6 have access to licensed care, which means 3 out of every 10 kids in our valley has access to licensed care. We're not going to be able to solve that problem, but we sure are going to do our best to put a big dent in it. The 160 capacity facility that we build, I think, will also serve as workforce development and help train other people as a pilot that can go across the San Luis Valley and other communities that are in need of these kinds of support. So I just want to say I really appreciate everything that the city continues to do to help this project move forward.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience who would like to make any comments in the hearing before we go to Zoom? Okay, so we're now, Ms. Martinez, if you can tell the Zoom participants how to raise their hand.
Oh, yes, if you're on the Zoom app and you want to speak right now for public comment, you'll use the raise hand feature in the bottom of your screen. If you're on a telephone, you'll dial *9. I don't see anyone choosing to raise their hand, Mayor.
Okay, I don't see any either, so I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Counselor Carson?
Unless there's discussion, I was just gonna make a motion to authorize staff to submit the CDBG application in the amount of $600,000.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Please start voting. Ms. Martinez?
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Awesome. Okay, thank you, Ms. James. Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda. City Manager Legal, motion approving updates to the City Council Policy Manual.
Thank you, Mayor. Over the last several months, there's been a few different items that council has discussed to possibly needing to update your policy manual. Some of those updates aren't as timely, and so we're kind of putting a pin in those to have for your June retreat discussion. But there were two items that council indicated were more timely and we needed to bring to you tonight. So one item is related to the departure of Chief Ken Anderson and concerns that he had raised. Council felt that it would be important to add language to where if a department head has tried several times to address some concerns with the city manager and they don't feel that those concerns are being addressed, that then they can place the item on the council agenda and there's no repercussions. And then that allows council to discuss the item and provide direction. So there is language that's been added to your council policy manual to address that. The other category of changes that was added to your council policy is in relation to concerns of confidentiality. The first type of change is the policy said, as far as expectations, to maintain the confidentiality of material discussed during executive sessions. Information presented or discussed in an executive session should not be shared with anyone at any time. What we did was to add language within that sentence to make it, or if you receive communication from the city attorney and it is designated privileged and or confidential, because obviously not all communication coming from the city attorney is privileged nor confidential. And so it's just to add that it's not just information you might receive in executive sessions. There could be other times the city attorney is presenting information that's privileged and confidential. Then the second item that was added as it relates to confidentiality is the mayor had indicated a desire to have the discussion of adding a fine up to 600. So the language it had already in the policy was council members who intentionally and repeatedly do not follow proper conduct may be reprimanded or formally censored by the council and lose committee assignments. Serious infractions of the code of conduct, such as even single violations of confidentiality, could lead to other sanctions as deemed appropriate by council. And then the language we added, depending on the severity of the infraction, council may impose a fine up to $600 per instance, which would require a majority vote. So two different categories, and that was the language that we added. Obviously, this is for you to discuss, wordsmith, change, decide if you want to do any of it, some of it. It's entirely council's prerogative.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sanchez. We have two mics on, Counselor Carson and then Counselor Vihil.
So, explain to me what it means, the second sentence, notwithstanding section seven of Article 3. I get what that means, but I guess I'm not really clear on what the difference is or what, except for the purpose of inquiry means. Like, what does that, enlighten me as to that. I don't understand what that means, I guess. What is that?
Sure, Counselor Concha, that was language that I suggested be in there because Section 7 of Article 3 essentially is that wall between council and employees of the city that says council can only deal with the city manager or your other direct reports, but council can only deal with the city manager. Council can't deal with other employees such as department heads who are going to be bringing this issue to council. So it's a little bit strange to have that charter prohibition and then provide this mechanism for department heads to directly deal with council. But because of the structure of it, I don't think it directly impacts that section of the charter. What you're really doing is dealing with then the city manager. It's the employee bringing something to your attention that you're going to deal with through the city manager. But I just wanted to make it clear that you're aware of the fact that there's this charter issue, and this provision doesn't really conflict with that. So maybe the language is a little bit clumsy in the sense that it almost sounds like, well, we're trying to make an exception to the charter, which you can't do by policy. But I do want to have you be aware that there is that's that wall that the charter provides there. This isn't really breaching the wall. It's a way to address concerns that may exist with the city manager.
Okay. I'm still confused, but it just,
You can take it out. It doesn't make a difference. In some senses, the fact that we're having this discussion has served its purpose. I guess what I want to highlight for council is that charter wall is kind of a part and parcel of the council manager form of government that the charter provides for us. And this provision is a little bit of a departure from traditional understanding of that. I don't think it's a problematic departure, but that language acknowledges that there's an issue there. So if you want in the policy manual, if you want that sentence gone, I don't think it changes anything. I think that's fine. I think we've had this discussion now with council and you're aware of that. So I don't feel strongly either way about that.
yeah, I just thought it muddied it. It almost felt like it nullified what we were doing. You know what I mean? It just, to me, that's what it felt like. So I mean, as long as I'm fine without it. But yeah, that was my only confusion there. So, I mean, if, again, we've had this conversation, so we knew that, you know, we had already talked about that as a council about that wall and what the charter looks like. So, I mean, we knew that we had to figure out some legalese to be able to create the mechanism. Okay, I mean, I guess it's neither here nor there because of this conversation, but I just wanted to be enlightened a little bit as to that. That was my only question or issue with it.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Carson. Councilor Vihil?
Thank you, Mayor. Two comments on both of the issues is, just, I appreciate that they're putting that in there. That first piece, that if a department head needs you talked about a lot, Mr. Carson, about a conduit of a way to talk to us without feeling any retribution or anything from the city manager, that there's an opportunity for that. I think that's one of the first things that we talked about as a council back in November, December, and January, and it's finally in there. So I would like the public to know that we are taking that seriously. The second piece is on the $600 fine, Mayor. Who's gonna do the investigation as to if there is another leak? Who's gonna go find out who did it?
That's a good question, Councilor Vihil. I'm not for sure if our attorney want to say anything or I could make comments in regards to that as well. If it comes to someone leaking out there, I believe, just like in this current situation, when a council member says something in public or they leak things out, it comes back to us in some form or fashion. So my hopes are that if information comes back, we're able to validate that information, confirm it, not to just accuse a person just because someone says a person said something, but to base our decision on hard facts. The other thing is this is basically a deterrent. I just hope to God we don't have to have this conversation. But the reason we're having this conversation is because someone did leak information that shouldn't have been leaked. But we have to find ways to hold people accountable. And that's what this is all about, is holding people accountable and hoping that we don't even have to have this conversation again, Councilor Vihil. But if we do, we'll be prepared to.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Okay. Any other comments about the policy manual or comments about anything on this motion, Councilor Carson?
I don't have any other comments. I think the next item is something we need to address. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion that council approve the updates to the city council policy manual. If anybody has any.
I'll second.
comments.
Okay, I do have one comment. I just want to clarify for the audience out there in internet land that, and it's not even a clarification, I'm just restating the point that Counselor Vihil made. All of this information we met and we discussed and we directed the city manager and the city attorney to draft something and insert it per our direction. It's not something that's coming from them to us. It's something that's coming from us to them. So, thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. No further discussion. Please start voting. Okay, Ms. Martinez.
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda. A motion authorizing the removal of the huts at Saint Benedict.
Thank you, Mayor. As with a lot of things related to Saint Benedict, we are learning as we go with this. And it's been, what rules do we need? And looking at other communities, how do we enforce the rules? What does that look like? And during 2021, there was COVID opportunities from a grant perspective that were very generous. And the idea was to put in some huts that would be sturdier than a tent, kind of be able to withstand the weather a little bit better. Hopefully would be warmer than tents. The other concept of the idea was that it could be used as an incentive, a stepping stone to be engaged with services, because one of the questions, there is a priority. So those with disabilities, veterans, if there was people who were engaging actively in case management and working to try to get out of the situation. So there is a priority system. The other concept was that if individuals could lock their belongings, that would more allow them to leave and find employment, keep employment, those types of situations. And so we were very excited about the grants and the generosity to try to help provide this for our unhoused community out there. How we set the structure up is that La Puente Outreach would kind of handle the prioritization. So the intake, the questions, working with them, how long have they been in there? But if there's any enforcement issues, that has always fallen to our community service officers. So if we have someone who's not following the rules, either at St. Benedict as a whole or in the huts themselves, our community service officers are involved in the enforcement. The things that have changed since the huts have been there and St. Benedict is obviously the city has also started our co-responder program. So in addition to our community service officers, we also have our co-responders who are actively engaged with the population out at St. Benedict. And they work very closely with La Puente Street Outreach, which is very engaged with the population as well. And so those kind of three groups have been working. And for about a year and a half to 2 years, I am looking for Brett. You can come on up to the microphone if you want. I think La Puente Street Outreach was starting to have concerns on if the huts were really working the way they were supposed to be working. We've had some pretty dramatic failures, usually related to misuse of propane. So we've had some fires out there. We have also had some carbon monoxide poisonings that have been happening. But I want to let Brett explain more of the day-to-day other dynamics, some from a hazmat perspective, but then the power structure that's occurring and some other things like that. So Brett, if you want to talk a little bit more about those items.
Yeah, and first of all, it's been really great working with the CSOs. All of them are really communicative. They call me, we call them. It's great. Same thing with the co-responders. We're all in constant communication with one another. So it certainly has presented some logistical issues, though, having the huts out there. One thing that we do notice, as you said, is we were trying to prioritize early on the people who would be the most vulnerable of that very vulnerable population. And we do prioritize them when we're selecting who's up to go into one of the huts. But what ends up happening is the most powerful and the most influential of the residents out there strong arm the people who are supposed to be in there out of them. At one point, I think only 1 or 2 of the huts had the person that was actually selected to be in that hut at that time. The rest of them were just people who strong armed their way into that hut. And it's gotten better and gotten worse over time, depending. There's ebb and flow to those sorts of things. Unfortunately, we just don't have the infrastructure surrounding the huts that we would need in order to enforce them, making sure that people who are supposed to be in them are in them. We can't have somebody out there 24/7. We can't have a full-time employee who's living at the camp. So, you know, as many phone calls as I can make to the CSOs and as many times as they can ask somebody to leave the hut, what happens when they leave because they can't be there constantly? Somebody can just strong arm their way back in again. So we do have that happen fairly often. You know, in terms of engagement with case management, that was another factor that I understand went into getting them to come, getting the huts in the first place was, you know, it would be an incentive for somebody to engage with case management with La Puente, with outside organizations and making sure that they're working towards their housing. We actually see demonstrably less engagement with case management for those who are staying in the huts versus not staying in the huts. We'd had 36 unique individuals who have stayed in the huts since they were built in 2021. 8 of those obtained long-term stable housing. It's 20%, which is less than the, pretty significantly less than the percentage that we've seen who were staying in tents out there that wound up in long-term stable housing. So, I'm sorry, I'm just making sure I'm getting the statistics right here. Yeah, so nearly double the positive housing outcome rate in tents versus the huts over less than half of the time frame is what we saw. There's also, you know, the issues of health and safety. They're more difficult to ventilate. We had some vents installed in them recently, and you know, nothing's stopping somebody from covering those up because they feel the draft come in. We can't police that. Same thing with, we handed out carbon monoxide detectors to everybody to make sure that they all had them. We check off on a box every month to make sure that they're still eligible to receive propane from us, that they have that and they have the batteries in them. When we go out to check month to month, I mean, 90% of the time, they don't have the batteries in them anymore. They take the batteries out and they use them for other things. I mean, we talked about ideas like bolting them to the wall with like a little cage around it, but you know, beyond that, the fires, you know, obviously we've lost 2 of the huts to fires. There's been issues with hoarding. It just gives like a closed off space for somebody to fill up with belongings, which can happen in a tent too, but a tent far more easy to replace. It's a smaller area. You know, but people tend to have, unless they're having big add-ons on them, it's less of an issue. We've had several instances of people who are staying in, individuals who are staying in those huts, you know, using the bathroom on the floor, it not getting cleaned up for months on end. It's not open to the elements like a tent would be. Food, animal waste, dead animals, rotting. I'm not trying to be intentionally grotesque or anything like that, but I've seen one of the huts that was, you know, cleaned out by another resident before they moved into it, that you stood 10, 15 feet away from the hut and you could, I couldn't even get near it. The stench was so bad, and flies flying out of it, just an inch thick pile of waste on the floor. And that's not, uncommon necessarily, including the one that we had to have taken down because it was condemnable. So my suggestion, based on, what I've heard from residents who are staying at the huts, that they're a little warmer, or I'm sorry, they're not warmer, they just stay warmer a little longer. But it's at the cost of, health and safety. So I don't want to think of it as like taking something away from the residents out there who already have so little. I think of it as doing something that's in the best interest of the folks who are staying there. I wouldn't feel morally correct about suggesting anything other than taking the huts away, being that I do have a vested interest in the well-being, health, and safety of the folks who are staying out there.
And I think it's not as serious as what you listed, but the doors don't, like, the locks either get removed, people know how to pick the locks aren't serving any purpose. And so really, we are not seeing individuals motivated to get themselves out of the situation they are in. And so it's not meeting the purpose of what we wanted St. Benedict to serve as. And go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, typically when I go out there and replace a doorknob on one of the huts, it's gone by the next day. People knock them off, they go get their own door handles and put them on, they lose the keys. Many of the windows get broken out, just vandalization, I guess, and burglary are huge issues there. I appreciate the idea going into the huts, where it would be a place for somebody to put their belongings and lock them so that they can go to work, so they can go to appointments. It's just not how they're functioning right now. Unless somebody has the power and influence and like network out there to keep their belongings safe when they leave, it's actually a motivator to stay put rather than go and engage in these other programs. People will tell me regularly that they don't want to leave the camp because they don't want to get their stuff stolen. They don't want to go into the shelter because they don't want to get their stuff stolen. They don't want to go to treatment because they don't want to lose their opportunity to be in a hut.
And I think, I didn't have this in the council communication, because I had forgotten about it when I was writing it, but it was about a year ago that at least one resident, if not others, had complained about the safety of the huts. And so we had a meeting with the Colorado Department of Public Health. And the carbon monoxide, the fires, the use of the propane were serious concerns for them. And really, you don't have a lot of options unless you invest heavily, which is not something we have the resources for, or if you remove the huts. And I don't think they were concerned enough at that point to force the removal of the huts, but they were definitely concerned enough to where they wanted to have a conversation and to make sure that we were trying to think through other options from a heating perspective, which there just doesn't seem to be other options. And the misuse of propane does create the safety risk in the huts that it doesn't create the same risk when you're in a tent.
Yeah, that is true. Like I said, the tents and huts get equally hot during the winter, so that's not the actual concern. The concern would be how long do they stay hot? But I would rather, spend a bunch more money providing propane to people, knowing that they're not gonna get carbon monoxide poisoning because it's so much easier to ventilate a tent, and knowing that the tent's not gonna, be as susceptible to fires, and the fires are not going to be as catastrophic when they happen.
So I would say about 3-4 months ago, knowing these concerns, what we had shared with council is as these huts are becoming dilapidated and pretty much condemned, that instead of trying to save them, we were going to dispose of them. But the issues just keep continuing out there to where even though there are some of the huts that, probably are okay, and if council allows the removal, we could just allow and donate that to the public type of situation. But there are several, it's not even worth paying to clean up from a hazmat perspective as well. And so with that, unless Brett, do you have something else
I'm
to
sorry,
add?
the one more concern I wanted to bring up too was, I know that many of them have had drugs used within them. And I know that it's a fairly expensive and time-consuming process to go through the procedures to clean like meth residue off of surfaces. And that hasn't happened since the birth of the huts. And, you know, I just to add to that.
Okay, so, this is just up for council discussion. So it was brought to us from outreach, but I will say the, community service officers and our co-responders are in agreement. As far as they're in no way working the way they're supposed to, and it's taking an extreme amount of time for something that's not working as well. So we want to turn it over to council for questions and then direction.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll turn it over to Counselor Vehil, then Counselor Krebs.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
This is, for me, this is kind of just easy, like, if La Puente is is on the front lines of the homeless issue, and if they're recommending we gotta get rid of these for a plethora of reasons, safety being the first and foremost of the residents, and I assume that our CSOs feel the same way. If police and La Puente are saying the same thing, this is easy to me, we gotta get rid of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Vehil. Counselor Krebs?
Thank you, Mayor. I have questions. Okay. What would be the timeline, if council decided to remove, what would be the timeline?
We would fit that into the schedule of streets. So we're getting ready within the next couple weeks to be starting some of our road construction. So it's something that we plan on using our own crews. So it would need to fit into the schedule of them being able to do that. Do
But
you,
would it be warmer than it is now?
Harry, do you want to come up and talk to this? And then I do want to mention we have Captain Mestis here as well, who is over the CSOs. So if there's any questions from an enforcement perspective.
I guess I didn't understand the question warmer.
It's cold right now, and so removing them from the huts, the timeline for that, would it be in a warmer month, like 2 months down the road? Not obviously not dead summer either, but
I don't think, I'm gonna assume it's not gonna be something we'll be doing immediately. There's gonna
Okay.
have to be some planning and coordination with La Puente as they can get some other tents or other facilities set up, so.
and that was my backup question, is the ones that are getting removed, even though they do have stuff, will you ensure that they do have tents and items so that they can stay within?
Yeah, tents and other survival stuff has always been something that we provided through La Puente, and it's something that we're going to continue to provide. And we actually have a specific budget set aside for emergency warming circumstances that come up. You know, set aside for like a warming shelter, should we have to do that again? And I'm assuming that those funds would be eligible for an expense like this. To the best of my knowledge, that would be true.
Okay, and then from a security thing, I know that we made an effort to move them away from one fence more into the middle. Would that still apply to that dirt road, that the ones that are on the side of the dirt road closest to the fence, they would move more to the middle just to keep the consistency?
So they can go back to the fence. They just haven't. They needed to move away so we could put the fence in, and they just haven't gone back yet. But probably when it gets hotter and you've got more of the shade, we're anticipating some of them to move their camps back. So we're not forcing them to stay in the middle right now,
Okay,
type of thing.
all right. I just didn't know if if we agree, if the huts get removed, that the group that is closest to the fence would have to move.
No, now I will tell you, when we've heard concerns, and Harry and I are continuously trying to brainstorm on how to improve things for the adjoining property owners there in the industrial park. And I throw a lot of crazy ideas at them, because sometimes I go, well, what if we do like a second fence that moves them even further away, or, you know, different things like that. But at this point, this is just the removal of the huts.
Okay.
And so they could still be anywhere within that fenced area.
Okay, so I don't have any more questions for you guys. Thank you so much for coming up.
But stay up here though, because we have some other council members.
I tried. So as you guys know, I'm a database person. It's like, you can recommend something to me, but you got to show me the numbers. You got to show me a possibility of me seeing the both sides of the same coin. And, you know, agreeing with Counselor Vihil, if LaPuente, who is on the front lines, is not only suggesting that, but they're bringing the data forward to support what they're saying. I'm ready to stand behind that. It was a good idea, and it is a national crisis, and we're doing everything we can to see what sticks and what doesn't. You know, the co-responder program stuck, and it's amazing, and it does great. This doesn't, or it did at the time, it doesn't now. And so for me, the cons outweigh the pros. The other two things is, if we agree to remove the huts, it's not the closure of St. Benedict's.
That's very, very, very important. You are correct. So there's only 12 huts out there right now, and we're averaging around 50 from a total population out at St. Benedict. So there's a lot that are intense and other types of situations. St. Benedict is still serving the purpose that it serves, which is to allow us to enforce our no camping in other locations. It also allows service providers to easily engage with the unhoused population and really work with them as they're trying to work out of getting out of homelessness as well. And so we're seeing some of those results. But so St. Benedict in and of itself is still working. It's the huts themselves, which are just 12 of them within St. Benedict. So thank you for that clarification.
And I had one other clarification, that I'm all done, I promise, guys. Is that the timing of this, to be honest, makes it look like we're discussing removing the huts while the airport housing is getting completed. So I just want to clarify that one does not, it's not one to the other. It's dismantling one, but the airport housing is still a whole separate project.
I wouldn't have even thought of that, but I think you are right. I think there is still a very big misconception out in the public that the housing that is being built on Airport Road, Horizon Heights, is for those who are out at St. Benedict, and that's simply not true. I cannot say that enough. Those who are at St. Benedict, not all, I'm sure there's one or two, but a significant amount are what would be classified as chronically homeless. And when you get into those categories, there's a much more serious potential for substance use disorders, mental health. Some may not want to move into housing type of thing. The type of housing these individuals would need is a much more intensive case management than the type of housing that we are building. The housing that is being built on the Horizon Heights housing, it's not free. You have to pay. It's going to be 6 months leases. There is prohibitions on who can go in there based on criminal backgrounds, all of those types of things. And again, it is not the type of housing most of those at St. Benedict need type of thing. That wasn't the capacity that we had. This is filling another niche. Now, there are other homeless individuals who might be couch surfing, who do have jobs, just can't be in stable housing right now. That might qualify. And there's a lot of other individuals as well. But again, it's not free, and it's not for those who are at St. Benedict.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome, Counselor Cribb. We have Counselor Dominguez, Carson, and then Counselor Jackie Vio.
You guys, I'm assuming I'm new here, so show me grace if I'm missing something, but I have a few questions. Is La Puente the closest to St. Benedict's? Like when it says staff, in the paperwork that I read, it says staff recommends. Is this staff at city as a whole, or is this?
It's both La Puente outreach, but it is also staff from a community service officer perspective and co-responder, and then meeting with me.
Okay, so my understanding is, aside from the huts, there's a governance scenario that you anticipate in La Puente, or from a city perspective, with the tents that stay behind. Is there talks around what that looks like for this, the issues you talked about, like strong arming, the,
Yeah, so I mean, it go back to how it was prior to the huts being there. So it's just an individual has their tent, they're entitled to be within one space.
so there's, so when they get a call, police show up, right, or sheriff's office. What kind of structure do we need to look at, or is there any conversations going on around an accountability piece with the folks there? Like, is anybody having conversations with them, La Puente, or about why these things might come about?
So many times when law enforcement responds to those, people don't tend to want to cooperate with us, or because they don't want any backlash at the end. When we leave, they still have to live there. So they tend not to cooperate with us too much. And we will kick them out of the hut that they strong arm per se. But then, like when we leave after 5, they know there's no community service officers present, they go back in.
Okay, so once the huts, if they are removed, I think there definitely needs to be a conversation around what is left behind looks like still, because I'm sure we'll still be experiencing the same issues. And I think there needs to be some kind of an accountability piece to the folks there, and that they understand, and not just to receive services and these things, but to understand that there's consequences to what this looks like for other community members too. And I would be willing to vote myself to be in any conversations with that with La Puente or whoever it is. But I feel that council definitely needs to be a part of an accountability piece moving forward, so we can disseminate this information clearly to the people that not only live around there, but to the people that do live in there, that there is possible action and consequences associated with them not taking you serious or anybody else serious. So.
And Counselor Dominguez, clearly, there can always be more communication and all of that. But just to check, Brett, as you've been working with the population, have you been talking to them as far as how these huts are working, and that it's, that it's probably going to start resulting in consequences and things like that?
Yeah, I can't remember a time where people weren't, already disregarding the rules surrounding the huts. It's just it's tough for us at La Pointe because we need to have those good foundational relationships with folks. And so we can't go out there and get somebody out of a hut that's not supposed to be in there because, we want that person to work with us. And we don't want people to perceive us as law enforcement or connected to law enforcement or whatever, and it's tough for law enforcement too, because, you can't live there. So it just presents its own unique set of issues.
Well, and I think part of where I was coming from is not more from an enforcement conversation, but what I was kind of hearing from Counselor Dominguez, and I could have not been hearing correctly, is more of, we're not just springing this on them. And then also afterwards, what is kind of our plan from a communication accountability perspective too? So do you feel like this is springing it on anybody type of thing?
No, not at all. And we communicate what the rules are for the huts. People sign something when they're getting into the hut the right way. They're supposed to sign something, and then I believe that the CSOs go around, and even when they find out that somebody's been in there that's not supposed to be, they still have them sign the same paperwork so that they know the rules of the hut. They know who's supposed to be in there. And they know that if they break them, one of the consequences is them being removed from that hut. We haven't spoken to anybody out there about the specifics of taking the huts down, but they have seen one get taken down already. And we still have, the future is infinite, so you have as much time as you need to give people as much warning as is necessary to make sure it's not sprung on anybody.
Well, and then irregardless of the huts, we do have the rules that are posted. We do have them signing the rules, and we do enforcement as much as we can. And part of where we've learned some is we weren't setting the bar high enough from keeping their locations clean type of thing. And so we have been raising that bar. And then we've also been then partnering with La Puente to pair it with kind of this carrot stick type of situation. And so if individuals are keeping their site clean to our CSO standard, and participating the day of the cleanup, then they are eligible for a gift card. So we're evolving some of those things. When we have serious violations of the rules, we have had individuals be trespassed out of it. And then there have been some individuals that we have been citing into municipal court as well. So there has been some accountability. But I think to your point of more communication and more of that is always very good too.
Yeah,
So I
I just-
don't know if I was getting where you were going.
Yeah, I just hate for this to happen, well, whatever happens with it, but then it stop, like conversations, because it still exists, St. Benedict. So I think it's a perfect opportunity to, somebody's gonna have to explain themselves once they start coming down, and it's a perfect opportunity to let everybody know involved, not just us talking about this, but the people that live there, that there are consequences to everything. And I think it's a fine line between dancing around something because we have to maintain a relationship with people and enabling people and then being accountable for what we do as a community. So that's all I had. So like, I can get you my number at the end or whatever, you can get a hold of me. If you do have any conversations, you all know where I'm at. If you would please invite me just so I can be up to date on anything that goes on with anything that happens after this.
So we have monthly meetings with the CSOs and La Puente Street Outreach. And so we're constantly meeting and updating and talking and going over things that we need to discuss as far as safety and everything else that goes out there.
Julie, did you want to say something? Good.
Just real quickly, I'm Judy Beatnell Smith with La Puente. I will follow up in that phone call because just like we thought the huts would work, they didn't work the way they were. I'm all with you in terms of saying, what are we gonna do going forward? So I will be calling you because I would love to have more folks and more minds to solve the problem. So thank you for that offer.
And I think, Judy, Lance has been sending some emails as well, of trying to say who needs to be at the table, some lessons learned, what do we do, that kind of stuff too. That probably lines up.
Yeah, so you'll hear more later on.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor Dominguez, Counselor Carson, and then Counselor Jackie Vihil.
My primary question was for Sam. So your hard recommendation, it's probably a good idea to remove them.
Yeah, that would be our recommendation. It's been problematic for the CSOs to respond out there and see everything and to deal with these people constantly. It's like a regular thing anymore. I mean, 1 week they're in and we have certain people that are supposed to be in there. The next week they go back. I mean, they go out there daily, if not twice. You know, they're constantly out there as well as the co-responders. And so, I mean, they see it as well with what's going on out there. But yes, that would be my recommendation, removal of the huts.
Okay. I believe strongly in listening to the people that are dealing with it. I do agree with Jamie in the fact that I think there probably should have been some warning, you know, hey, guys, either stop this or we're gonna pull the huts. Now, I think that was kind of a drop into the ball there because now we are just gonna spring it on them if we pull them. But to that point, a lady in the audience earlier, spoke about the case, Monroe Martin versus Boise. That was the reason we built that camp, was to cover the city's butt for the purpose of being able to create a safe place for them to be able to camp and to keep them out of people's yards and out of people's driveways. And so that was the approach we took at the time. The huts was a secondary kind of side effect. I don't like the word experiment. I've heard it thrown around in the last couple of days. I don't think that was the case at all. I think we were trying to help people out. I think warning them would have helped. But I've heard from more than just, PD and staff about the hierarchy out there and what's going on and the people being bullied and intimidated. And so that sucks. I mean, it's not good that it turned out that way, but I believe also that the people that are out there looking out for the people that live there need to be safe. And I mean, you know, when you guys could open a door, somebody could open a door and when them huts explode with all the gas leaks and stuff, we've already had it happen. Now, what happens if somebody goes out there, staff member that isn't meant to be, or, and not that that should happen to anyone, but, I think we did what we had to with the opening of the camp, and I mean, if the CSOs are recommending it, I think that we need to really consider that and think about doing what we have to there. I mean, it does stink for the whole situation, but that was my primary question, if that's how you guys felt. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Carson. Counselor Jackie Vigil?
So my question is, since you said that it's a hierarchy out there and the huts are occupied by the powerful and most influential, do you think that they have enough warning that these huts are gonna possibly be taken down, and how do you anticipate everybody reacting? Like, are they gonna be upset? Are they gonna, how is the safety gonna look of the other people around them? You know, so if they're already in that powerful mode and they have that mindset and they feel like they're running the camp because they're in those huts and they can, you know, basically do what they want, do you think there's gonna be any retaliation or anything like that?
I mean, to answer the first part, yes, they're gonna be upset about it. I think advocating for somebody doesn't always mean saying exactly what they would say about an issue. It's representing their best interest. And sometimes somebody's lived experience can make their opinion about something very valuable, and sometimes it can make it not valuable at all. I'd like to give the example of if you polled like the community members that stayed out there and asked if we should, you know, legalize doing or enable them to do heroin in public spaces, probably get a pretty positive response from that. But that doesn't mean it's a good policy. So, you know, representing the best interest of the folks who are staying out there, I think in this circumstance means getting rid of that, even though it's something, getting rid of those huts, even though it's something that they would say is in their best interest. So that's number one. And then number two is, I think that we've already seen kind of like a case study on it with the one hut that was removed. The other residents got upset with that individual because they perceived it as his fault that that hut got removed. So, I mean, I think when it's everybody all at once, it's actually probably gonna be the cleaner way to do that. Other than having the opportunity for each of those you know, as we take them down one by one, everybody gets retaliated against, versus if it happens all at once, then it's, you know, a collective just decision that's being made by an outside entity, and then everybody can get mad at me like they usually do, so.
And also, I mean, currently, out of the 12 huts that are out there, there's only 9 that are occupied, so 3 are unoccupied. And during that transition phase, when we're trying to get somebody in there, that's when they go in there and just take over it. As far as the warning, I mean, that's all dependent on Harry and when he wants to do it. I mean, we can give him a 45-day notice from now until when we're gonna remove the huts.
Good. Okay, Counselor Hensley and then Counselor Dominguez. Okay, Counselor Dominguez, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that when this does happen, if it does, when we make this decision, we have your support in hashing out what it looks like moving forward in the respect of how this unfolds in community. So we ain't the bad guys or you ain't the bad guys. We're gonna really have to look at the whatever scenarios you signed and use the paperwork that they agreed to and use some of that context in anything that comes out in the newspaper or anything, any moves that are made aside from us right here, right now. Definitely, we need to stay in communication. So, because once it hits social media or whatever, I'm sure we're gonna have different opinions about this, like she had mentioned. And I think if we're ready for that and in agreement with each other that this has come to this because of you're closer there, and I'm not saying you need to be the bad guy, but as long as we know this is why this is happening, they need to understand the people there that they signed stuff and that this is what was supposed to happen, this is what didn't happen, that they're clear on that we just didn't say, hey, pull.
Thank you, Counselor Dominguez. Counselor Hensley, I know you said you wanted to make a motion. Do you mind if I make a comment before you make that motion? Okay. Um, so, Ms. Sanchez, I have some questions for you, and I'm quite sure all the council know the answers to the questions that I'm gonna ask to you. It's not necessary for us, but it's for the public and the people who are listening, so that they have an understanding and clarifying some of the things that are floating around the community. If you don't mind, could you share with us, how many city dollars were spent on those huts?
$0, but we did have staff involved to make sure that they were being designed correctly and then when they were being placed. So staff time, was involved, but as far as dollars, it was grant funded.
Okay, grant funded. And when we say that we're going to dispose of those huts, but we may allow the public to have access to them, what would that look like?
I don't know. For me, I'm a much more simplistic person as far as just dispose of them. There might be a handful that if someone wanted to clean them out and use them as a shed in the backyard or something like that, they could be usable. We could just post it and have a first come, first serve, and they take it in the condition that it's in. But it would be something that I'd want to make sure Harry's comfortable with, because I definitely don't want to create more work for our staff.
Okay, and if you could just clarify, because believe it or not, this has came up, and I'm just trying to cut back on all the misinformation that circulates through social media. When people see those huts being moved, are they gonna be moved to Horizon Heights
No.
in any location near that area?
No, so if we don't allow the community to come pick up some of those huts for private use, they will be disposed of. And the individuals who have been in the huts, can choose to remain in St. Benedict's. And so working with La Puente as far as from a tent perspective or things like that, individuals from St. Benedict are not being moved into the Horizon Heights housing.
Okay, and is this decision that we're talking about right now being made solely by one individual, or is this a collective, collaborative effort of people talking about a problem that we have right now?
It's 100% coming from those individuals who are boots on the ground. And so it's from La Puente Street Outreach, it's from our community service officers and our co-responders. And so it's individuals who are regularly working with this population and have been trying to figure out every which way to make it successful, who are making the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Jan Vigil?
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
Just wanna, my opening comment was really brash and I apologize for that. And yet I still agree 100% with you, with the decision that we're about to make. But we did, like you said, Mr. Carson, it wasn't an experiment. It was a way to help people out there. And I do agree. Mr. Mestis, you brought it up, maybe, giving them a warning time, you know, of 30 days, 45 days to prepare for this. And then I was glad to hear that La Puente will still provide tents and survival equipment and that, so I feel much better with going ahead with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Vigil. Counselor Hensley?
So I'd like to add one thing before I get to that, is I actually feel we should dispose of them. I feel like there's a risk, especially hearing that could be drugs in any of them. And obviously we'd have to go through a lot to test that. And I just feel that's a liability and I wouldn't want to put people at risk. So I would feel more comfortable, honestly, just getting rid of them to not take that risk. So I just would throw that in. Obviously it's a tough situation, but I think hearing all the arguments that obviously, there's always two sides to a story and there's some that are gonna be one way or the other, but it feels like what's been said reinforces the fact. So I'll actually make a motion to authorize the removal of the huts at St. Benedict.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Counselor Carson has his mic on.
I was just gonna ask Eric, what were the legalities around the issues that we could abstain on?
Okay, you good? All right,
No.
all right. So we have a motion, a second. No further discussion. Please start voting. Okay, Ms. Martinez?
The motion carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, committee reports. Do we have any committee reports? Anybody? Turn your lights on if you do. Counselor Hensley? You
Sorry.
sure do.
I've been to some meetings.
Okay.
So I'll start off with the rec board. First of all, I was very, I was welcomed, and everybody on the committee was very kind to me and welcomed me, so that was really nice. I'm gonna enjoy being on this board. Some of the things that came up, was the idea of potentially, the idea of putting some park hours on the parks, having them closed at certain times. There was still discussion of what those times would be. Also discussion of potentially having signs up about no weapons, things like that. So there's discussion about that. Some of the things that came up that I'm super excited about is there was project and grant updates. And one of them is there's grant to dredge the pond, which I think has not been dredged before. And so what it'll really do is deepen that water. I didn't really quite know what it would do, you know, like what the benefit was. Allow fish to potentially be there year round, things like that, because it'll be lower so they can be there, I guess, not die. But anyway, so super exciting stuff there. The north side of the rec center has had damage from water, so they are looking to redo the roof on that side and extend it out so that it would help with that situation. There is a shower replacement for the rec center happening next month, so that's been planned. And I think this is super exciting. So I left, so what I thought was the best to last is I know how strong disc golf is, and they are putting a porta potty out there now. So for the disc golfers and anybody who's out there, and there's also 8 disc golf tournaments already planned for this year. So I thought that was exciting. Okay, that was meeting number 1. I also was at the Main Street Advisory meeting. And so some exciting stuff there. Save a date, August 17th, Rails and Ales is coming back. And so that's kind of exciting. So put that, it's still being planned, but so save that. March 1st is Restaurant Week, and there are 14 participants for that. And in April is We Love Our National Park Month. So we've got lots of fun stuff coming up. There was quite a discussion on the positive movement of filling downtown, but there was also some discussion to make sure that the empty buildings are getting filled, some of the ones that are still not filled, and how to make that happen, and also making sure the correct type of businesses are going into the downtown. So there was some discussion on that, but overall, just really good positive movement. And then Heather brought Joey in, Interim Chief Spangler. And actually this became a highlight. So they gave 47 tickets last Wednesday downtown or in that area for speeding and things like that. After they left, it was really interesting because the people on the Main Street Committee really were super happy about that because that's something they've been wanting for some time. And also a lot of positive comment about his office or the officers being more present downtown, walking in, talking, things like that. So I felt like that was really positive, and so I wanted to thank Chief Spangler for doing that and making that happen. So I think that was really a great thing. So 2 really good meetings with a lot of good action.
Great reporting, Counselor Hensley. Great job. Okay, any other committee reports? All right, if not, we'll go to the next item on the agenda, which is staff announcements.
Okay, Mayor, we just have one staff announcement, and so Harry will come up to give an update on a situation.
Just a quick update on the homes that were damaged from the sewage backup on Princess Anne Court. 2 out of the 3 homes have pretty much been repaired. The one completely, the second one is kind of at the final stages. The third one's a little bit of a challenge. The homeowner, she left for an extended period. As the funds were being released, she said, I'll be back in a month and I'll take that time and that's when I'll start repairing the home. Well, she's been having some trouble since she got back. I think she got back, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. The insurance company is a third party. The city goes through a broker and that broker deals with the third party, agency. Kind of told her we're out of money, basically. So I think what kind of happened is the first 2 homes being repaired used the money that was released initially. So they had to the broker had to put in another request. So they're kind of waiting for the funds to become available. Then they'll get Miss Gretchen, up and running. We weren't aware of it till last week. So, staff is, currently working on it, trying to resolve it from what we can do, which is pretty much limited since it's, a broker and then a third party. But Jolene's been sending out emails, phone calls. I met with Gretchen today, kind of trying to explain the situation to her, what the city's doing on her behalf and trying to resolve this. So hopefully in the next week or 2, we'll be able to resolve that and get her underway as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Harry. Okay, any other staff announcements? Okay, what about, the next item is going to be, council, comments. If you have any comments, light up your mic and I'll recognize you. Okay. Don't see any, lights on. I just want to, say one thing, to Harry and his department. I can't disclose all this information, but a person did call me this past week and, they were calling actually to say thank you to your department for some work that you all have done. I'm not going to go into detail. But they called the after hours number. They were not expecting to get a call back until the next morning. Someone on your team called back within maybe an hour or so, went out and resolved that matter. And that person said that they greatly appreciate the efforts of your team. So just wanted you to know that. Okay. All right. If there are no other comments, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Good job, everybody.